There are a number of reasons why you might think Greasus Goldtooth would be pretty decent in multiplayer. He's got massive weapon strength with anti-large and armor piercing and magic damage, which makes him pretty good at fighting demons in melee. However, he does have a few major glaring weaknesses. Primarily, his slow speed being only 35, same as Noblar's, means that he's actually slower than most of your faction. All of the ogres, actual ogres, will be faster than him. And obviously, you know, the cavalry and saber tusks especially, so that is an issue for sure. Only 55 armor is also not great. He's relatively expensive, and he's also not a caster lord. And perhaps most importantly of all, he's not Scrag, so he doesn't give buffs to Gorgers, which are definitely the best unit for ogres in Domination multiplayer. Now, this is a replay from the recent tournament that Creative Assembly actually hosted for content creators over the weekend. Not all of the games were allowed to be streamed or were streamed live on their own Twitch channel. We were allowed to stream them, but I chose to record them post-fact. Today, I'm going up against Shadow 2000, who is not a multiplayer content creator, but as you will see here, definitely performs very well for himself. He's going up against my Tzeentch here. I've got a Herald with 2 Doom Knights as an opener, Forsaken, Pink Horrors of Tzeentch, 2 Blue Horrors of Tzeentch. I've got 4 Forsaken in reserve, 3 Flamers, 3 more Pink Horrors, 2 Screamers, and 1 Fury for some flying mobility, plus 2 more Blue Horrors just to fill out numbers. My opponent, Shadow, coming in with Mr. Greasus, the Over-Tyrant. Got a couple of Lead Belchers as well, a Scrap Launcher, some Bulls dual hand weapons, 1 regular Bull, 1 Noblar, and then in reserve, he's got his Caster with Lore of the Great Maw for healing, and an Iron Blaster, 1 unit of Mournfang Cavalry, a couple of Gorgers, 1 more Scrap Launcher, a unit of Bulls with Iron Fists, Saber Tusk pack, a couple more cheap Bulls, and 3 more Saber Tusk packs. So we're on the Mountains of Born map once again. You guys might be sick of seeing this map. I don't know. It's definitely one of the best Domination maps for multiplayer. Hopefully they do add some more maps relatively soon as well. That's one of the biggest issues in my opinion. Besides UI issues, and anyway, not going down that road. That's a topic for another day, but back to Greasus, the shockingly obese, the wealthiest, fattest ogre who ever lived, perhaps. Definitely in living memory, at least. The thing is, he does get wheeled around on his mobility scooter that's being pushed by Noblars, hence why it's Noblar speed. And that 55 armor and relatively large hitbox. I mean, he's not got the biggest hitbox in the world, especially considering how much HP he has, but he is no doubt a thick boy trundling along on his cart of loot here. These 2 Noblars have got to be just ridiculously swole. And with his fancy mace out, nice magic damage, anti-large AP, sticking the tip of the mace right in that cup there. That's amazing. Pretty good stuff. This is probably, in my opinion, the toughest matchup for the Ogres. While Slaanesh, we looked at yesterday, is probably one of their best matchups. This is definitely one of their toughest. The reason being, Tzeentch can just amass an overwhelming amount of firing presence, just a ton of literal firepower that can overwhelm Ogre's lowish defensive stats. They do have quite a bit of HP, typically, Ogre units do, but you have relatively limited missile block units, not to mention just, you know, kind of the nature of monstrous infantry. If they take a lot of missile fire, a lot of low armor especially, they can start to lose models pretty quickly and lose stopping power. So, something to be aware of. I'm going to move up very patiently and just put my horrors here in the woods with the Forsaken so they can't get blasted by these Lead Belchers or the Scrap Launcher. I'm also going to bring my Doom Knights way up wide here. I'm just kind of scouting to see if there's any Noblar trappers hidden out way far in the wings here. Same thing with these Doom Knights on the far side, just doing a little bit of scouting. Kind of preparing. My objective with the Doom Knights is to come in and get on these Lead Belchers. Lead Belchers' DPS is definitely pretty legit. Their shots also do penetrate, which makes them quite strong. In terms of kind of comparisons to Ushabti Great Bows, that is a pretty good comparison in terms of the damage output. Lead Belters are significantly less armored, though, and they also don't deal armor piercing in melee with sort of equally weak melee stats in terms of attack and defense. I don't remember exactly what Ushabti Great Bows are. Those of you guys who are familiar with that unit from Total War Warhammer 1, or 2, rather, not 1, but anyway. You can see here that the shots do come in. They're going to do quite a bit of damage to the shields, to the barrier of the Doom Knights initially, but this is one super strong aspect of the barrier is I can take these volleys while charging in, and it allows me to essentially not take any actual HP damage until I start to get into combat here, where I'm going to get rear charged by some bulls on this unit, so that's not exactly ideal. But all this time, Greasus, if we check in with him, is just trundling along in the center, moving up very, very slowly. You can see the fact that he is so far behind the rest of his forces sort of starts to show his lack of speed there. He can get isolated relatively easily because of that, but we're able to come in and just easily mop up the lead belchers. We get the horrors in range to start slinging some little spells. Not strictly spells, but fire at least, magical fire. Gonna get a charge in here from the Morn Fangs. They actually don't do all that much damage, but quite a bit of disruption, and it kind of throw the models of the blue horrors everywhere. Once they start actually doing attack animations, their splash damage, you can see it's not actually all that great. The lead belcher, scrap launchers do come in and land a couple of more shots there, but the horrors can kind of just turn around. We're also going to call down a little bit of Searing Doom. Tends to do pretty good damage to cavalry models. Maybe not as much as I would have expected there, but still pretty decent. Also rear charging in with the Forsaken. Here comes Greasus, though, with his magic damage, ready to pummel out some horrors. If I can get the horrors to start shooting at him, we can do quite a bit of damage. But Gorger's also moving in. We got Saber Tusk Pack moving in for my opponent here. Shadow coming in heavy with some push. But the Doom Knights, having already shattered the lead belchers, now move in and start to interrupt the scrap launcher. They're going to get rear charged by bulls. But the Screamers coming in with their anti-large for a rear charge. Another unit of Screamers saturating in here. Screamers are definitely a very strong unit in Domination multiplayer and also in land battles, definitely. I mean, anti-large AP flying unit. The AP, of course, doesn't matter quite so much here. It'll be nice to have against the scrap launcher, but regardless, just wearing through the Ogres there. Meanwhile, over on objective number 1, we've got an overwhelming presence of infantry, so we have managed to secure for the time being. These horrors getting absolutely eaten alive by Gorgers and Saber Tusks, but we're able to hold just long enough to allow me to actually cap the objective, finish off these Mournfangs. But the Forsaken and the Pink Horrors that are fighting in here are definitely having a hard time. Greasus, if I take a look, his ability kit that was actually brought here does have Stand Your Ground, which gives a nice melee defense buff, something that Ogres generally lack. He's also got the Scepter of Titans to give him additional bonus versus large and even more armor-piercing damage. Not going to be super applicable here because I didn't bring like an Exalted Lord of Change or a Soul Grinder or anything really that Greasus would need to fight. I would think, at least on paper, the better matchups for Greasus, if there are any good matchups for Greasus, are ones in which he needs to fight a greater demon, probably, in melee, which, you know, you might have to in this matchup, but it's unlikely. From Tzeentch's perspective, it's pretty safe to take the Herald up on the disc in the air for relatively cheap. He can shoot, he can sling spells, he can also just kind of avoid combat altogether in melee as much as possible. And since the Ogres don't already have any flying units, the only thing they can do is to try and shoot at him, and his speed allows him to dodge a lot of their shots and just kind of stay out of harm's way in general. Screamers finishing off that scrap launcher there. Saber Tusks come in, get a nice little countercharge action, are able to finally finish off those Doom Knights. But man, Doom Knights have to be the best flying unit we've ever seen for tying units down. Greasus does manage to secure, though, with the Gorgers and the Saber Tusk Pack take over objective number 3. So I'm currently only holding the center and actually slightly behind on tickets, even though, unfortunately, we can't see the army damage like up here in this top left like you can during live games. So I can't show you how far ahead I am on army damage, but rest assured, I am indeed ahead on army damage. Barrier Forsaken coming in here. The hits that they're taking from these Ogre dual weapons initially, you can see just barely starting to go through the barrier there. Makes them so much stronger on the charge. They can take a volley to the face, they can take a brutal countercharge and not get savaged in the same way that Forsaken previously would for Warriors of Chaos, or even the Forsaken for Nurgle. They'll get that poison contact effect to not take quite so much damage, but in practice, the barrier is much better. Not to mention, The Tzeentch Forsaken also have magic attacks. Not that that's super applicable here. I don't think, yeah, Gorgers don't have physical resistance. I don't know. I'd have to look. I don't think any Ogre units actually have physical resistance. But regardless, just the high weapon damage overall of Forsaken is helping me hold out quite well here. The Gorgers are definitely dangerous, and Greasus is as well. But him over here by himself, kind of away from support. Shadow doesn't have a lot of mobile units that could come respond if I were able to isolate Greasus, so I'm going to start to develop some units in to try and deal with him. We've got some Flamers moving up in the center, also got a single Forsaken to run over onto the side objective to capture that, so we can start to even out this points distribution here. The victory tickets not get too far behind, but final transmutation going to go down here. Unfortunately, these two units that I was trying to hit with it did rout away, but at the very least we get those Gorgers. It's not... Oh, it is upgraded, so Overcast Final Transmutation. Arguably a little bit overkill for a single unit of Gorgers, purely based on value, but Gorgers are such a dangerous unit. I just wanted to get rid of them as quickly as possible, especially with the support of Scrag. My opponent has not brought out his caster yet, so he hasn't been able to actually heal anything, but... Now, finally, we're going to hopefully get an engagement on Greasus, maybe. At the very least, just tie him up with some Furies and not allow him to get loose. And, oh yeah, here come the damage dealers, the Flamers. Moving up into a position, we're actually going to move away with the Furies. And now, Greasus' speed is really going to come back to haunt him, because even if he wanted to get away from this overwhelming blue fire, that is just not going to be an option at this point. He's just too slow, and oh, he's just getting straight up grilled. Absolutely roasted alive, which is, I feel, is very appropriate for somebody as corpulent as Greasus. Oh man, those Flamers just do such brutal damage. Poor Greasus goes down. The Flamers have already amassed more than their value. Definitely paid for themselves very quickly just in those shots. So, I mean, Scrag, being that he can self-heal, he's got much better abilities, much better mobility. He is going to be the go-to choice for Domination multiplayer, I think, in almost every matchup for Ogre Kingdoms, at least for the foreseeable future. Again, maybe you want to take Greasus specifically against, like, Khorne, or... I don't know. Even against Khorne, though, I think he probably still loses to the big, nasty Khorne stuff. And Khorne Halberds are also pretty real in that matchup. Slaanesh, I don't know. I think, again, it's just more cost-effective to take Scrag. Like, he can fight okay against Slaanesh, and you can take Scrag plus a Giant, and it's definitely more expensive than Greasus, but it gives you two strong single entities. And anyway, Nurgle, maybe. Again, the slow speed doesn't hurt so much in that matchup, perhaps. Maybe that's another one where Greasus could perhaps do okay, but really need to play around with him a bit more and see. Definitely not against Tzeentch. In fact, just Tzeentch's character sniping is strong enough that for most factions, it's actually tough to take characters at all if they're not very mobile or flying or can contest or run away from the Tzeentch snipe attempts, try and survive or tank through them. It'll just be tricky, so Greasus definitely feeling that in this particular battle. More lead belchers being brought in, though. Try and finish off those screamers. Just keeping my opponent's units as much as I can balled up in his deployment. We still technically have not taken the lead, although I have captured objectives 1 now and still holding number 2. We've also got some units moving over to try and cap objective number 3. These Flamers do actually count as monstrous infantry, so a lot of people wouldn't think about it too much because they're a ranged unit, but they do have full capture power, a full 6 capture power, especially with all 12 unit models still online. So now seeing that my opponent's kind of rushing the center here, trying to get back an objective, taking a lead on points, but he's also probably going to be able to cap this far side objective. I really don't have the units in position to at least push those Ogres away, so everything all in on the center. All I need to do is protect these 2 objectives for the time being, and I should be able to take home the win. So, to that effect, we're going to get the Forsaken, the Flamers, the Screamers all moving in to try and take out these Bulls holding the center. Lead Belchers pull up into a position to fire on this other unit of Flamers here, but just by volume of fire, get it? Anyway, we do have enough models, and not to mention the Screamers, and this one Doom Knight that's still left. Doom Knights have insanely strong leadership. He's going to also move in and engage, gets killed by Ogres, but there you go. Knights of Tzeentch making their final stand. Even more lead belchers brought in. I definitely think my opponent's idea of just trying to outshoot Tzeentch, because actually with the Iron Blaster I think would be even better. Iron Blaster's damage is ridiculously broken for the cost right now. Iron Blaster and Lead Belcher I have found pretty good success with just because the Tzeentch actually doesn't have much in the artillery range. They are absolutely devastating, you know, in terms of missile damage up close. Anything within like less than 100 range, you're going to get destroyed probably. That being said, again, nothing really that far of artillery range, so like even the Lead Belchers being sort of demi-artillery range, and obviously the Iron Blaster and even the Scrap Launcher having much greater range, you can just outshoot Tzeentch from a significant distance, and that high damage shooting as well, which is definitely what the Iron Blaster and the Lead Belchers are, can wreck Tzeentch units in a huge hurry. I'd be curious to see even the I mean, technically on paper, the Man-Eater pistols deal more missile damage over 10 seconds than the Lead Belchers, but their bullets don't have penetration, and they also seem to be subject to missile block chance. Tzeentch doesn't have a whole lot of units which even have missile block chance, and, you know, more than that, I think maybe the Man-Eater pistols could fight Doom Knights a little bit better than the Lead Belchers. Perhaps they are also a decent unit. Perhaps you just take a mix, honestly, of all of the different Ogres shooting units, including Nobblar Trappers as well, in order to contest. But my opponent with enough comeback supply, I also have about, you know, 3,500 supply just kind of banked here. All I need to do is capture one objective, and I will take home the victory. I'm like 15 points away from winning right now, so even if he does capture that center, which he's not able to, still will be able to take the victory, but very close. All things considered, you know, my opponent bringing subpar Lord choice and not having a ton of experience playing Domination multiplayer, I have to say, very impressed by his performance, and it was decent. I mean, his heart and mind is in the right place with, again, trying to outshoot Tzeentch from a distance. With Ogres, I definitely think that's the right call. I just think Greasus is not the one to lead the way in this type of an army. Yeah, even Scrag in this particular matchup, again, can be somewhat vulnerable just because Tzeentch's character sniping is so legit. Maybe you even take a Tyrant for the armor because the Herald's shooting attack is non-armor piercing primarily. Still managed to rack up 2,000 damage value. Both my Doom Knights didn't pay for themselves in terms of raw damage output, but tactically shutting down those Lead Belchers and even just tying down the Scrap Launchers too was definitely enough to pay for them. The Forsaken of Tzeentch probably trade reasonably well into the Ogre's infantry, but it's not ideal. The Flamers definitely came in and did a ton of damage to Greasus, and taking down Greasus was obviously huge. And then the Screamers, too, really good as reinforcements in this matchup to bring in, rear charge those Ogre units, help them stay cleared out for Greasus forces, though. Greasus himself, I mean, we'll have to look at his kit in just a second here, but he's fairly expensive, and not even making back 1,000 damage value is pretty painful. Lead Belchers did a little bit better, and the bulls, the cheap bulls, can be very cost effective. Yeah, 797 on this cheap bull right here. I definitely think you want to max the 500 cost bulls before you start taking variants like the shields, the Iron Fists, or the dual hand weapons. Although if you're going to take a variant, I do think the Iron Fist is the way to go here. That missile block chance does work against most Tzeentch shooting. Pretty much everything except like the Flamer, or, I mean, obviously the Soul Grinders, like artillery attack also. But anyway, and look at that too. The Iron Blaster was only in for a few seconds and still almost managed to pay for itself. So for my opponent's army, again, if I were to just to kind of fine-tune this, I might actually even just straight up cut Greasus and take an Iron Blaster as my Lord, because you can do that in Domination. Whatever unit you take in this #1 army slot will count as your Lord. And the Iron Blaster counting as your Lord, I mean, it's going to sit back and shoot, and Tzeentch might try and come goon it, but you can keep a couple units in protection to try and push away, like Doom Knights, for example, and the Iron Blaster can stay relatively secure. So, I don't know, maybe I'll have to try that in this matchup. I have played this once from the Ogre side and was able to do reasonably well outshooting Tzeentch. I will probably show you guys that replay, assuming I still have it. But anyway, Sabertucks also perform pretty decently. That hard-hitting mobility can be very good against the missiles of Tzeentch, especially for tying up something like Flamers. But regardless, very well played to my opponent. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one, and hopefully it gives you an explanation as to why you're not likely to see Greasus in multiplayer too much He's just too slow, unfortunately, so it is what it is. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you have a wonderful day. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification so every time I upload new videos, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.